Okay. Okay, so we will begin with the homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, and today is September 12th, 2020. And so good morning, everybody. And we will now be continuing our reading and discussion of the Anguttara Nikaya, the numerical discourses, which we're working through gradually. And we are now in the Book of Fours. And the first sutta that I have for discussion today is number 73, which distinguishes the ways of speaking between a bad person and a good person. So this is a very, very practical discourse of the Buddha, not concerned with abstract philosophy or with the kind of intensive meditation practice that might be undertaken by an ascetic monk living in the jungle. But this is some guidelines to our practice in everyday life, which could stop us from creating a lot of trouble for others and for ourselves. And so this sutta contrasts 4 qualities of a bad person with 4 qualities, the counterpart qualities of a good person. And so this is the way the bad person conducts himself or herself. So a bad person disclose, and you could ask yourself while we're reading the sutta, does this does this correspond to anything in my experience? Do I ever find myself falling into these bad qualities, and have I developed these good qualities? So the bad person discloses the faults of others even when not asked about them. Even much more so when asked. But when he is asked about them, then he speaks about the faults of others just totally, fully, and in detail. And then on the other side, again, the bad person does not disclose the virtues from others, even when asked about them. And when he is asked about them, even though led on by questions, he speaks about the virtues of others only with gaps and omissions, not fully or in detail. So from these two, you could understand this is a bad person. Then we come to one's own faults and virtues. So the bad person will not speak about his own faults, even when asked about them. How much less so when asked about them. But when he's asked about his faults, then he'll speak about them with many gaps and omissions, not fully or in detail. And then the bad person will disclose his own virtues, even when not asked about them. How much more than when asked? But when he's asked about them, led on by questions, he speaks about his own virtues fully and totally, going on and on in detail. So from these characteristics, we could understand this is a bad person. So this delineation of the qualities of the bad person shows us that we have to be very, very careful when we're talking about others, because we all have this natural tendency, a kind of deeply rooted tendency, which I would say springs from a merging together or a kind of synchronicity or collaboration between at least two unwholesome roots, or even more unwholesome qualities. One is ill will. So ill will is what disposes us to look for the faults of others. And sort of the mind has this natural disposition to be seeking the faults of others, particularly the faults of people that we feel a natural dislike for. But even it could be even for those who are dear and agreeable to us, still we tend to dwell upon their faults and their shortcomings. And so one of those tendencies is this disposition towards ill will. And the other disposition or tendency that leads into this is conceit, particularly taking the conceit that takes the form of atimana, of thinking that one is better than others. And so one wants to rank oneself through the tendency to conceit. One has this disposition to rank oneself, to rate oneself in relation to others. And in order to give oneself mentally, to give oneself a good score and to be able to think of ourselves as being better than others, then we look for their faults. And in order to win the affection of others and to gain the approval of others and to establish close bonds with others, we dwell upon to establish bonds with people that we like or admire. We will choose a third person or somebody outside ourselves and the person we admire, and we will dwell upon their faults and speak about their faults. And when not asked about them, we do so, just we start speaking about their faults. And when we're asked about them, then we speak about the faults in fully and in detail. So the mind can, or you can just go on over and over for minutes and minutes, and even for an hour, speaking about the faults of others. And if anybody brings up as a kind of objection that others have virtues, then you're reluctant to speak about them, to approve of the virtues of others. And even when you're led on by questions, then you might grudgingly admit that the other person has some virtues and good qualities, but one will do so in a very sparing way, not elaborating upon the good qualities and virtues of others. So this is the way one relates to the faults and virtues of others. Then when it comes to oneself, that one has this tendency to sort of conceal one's faults, to cover them up, and one is reluctant to speak about them. But if somebody presses you and pushes you into a corner where you have to admit your faults, then you do so reluctantly with gaps and omissions. But when it comes to your virtues, then you're ready to praise yourself to the sky, always speaking about your good qualities, what you've accomplished, what you've achieved. Could be truthful, it could be Could be through falsehood, that I am the best person, the most intelligent, the most loving, the most caring. I am the most generous person. I'm the most diligent person. I meditate 6 to 8 hours a day. I've given this much in charity. I've written these books, those books. I have this award, that award, this honorary degree, that honorary degree. So you're ready to go on boasting and bragging about all of your good qualities. So on these grounds, when you encounter a person who speaks and behaves in this way, you could form the judgment, this is a bad person. And then the opposite is, how do you recognize who is a good person? This is, the Pali word that's used here is sappurisa. And sometimes the word sappurisa is used in the Buddhist texts in a narrow sense to refer to those who are Aryan persons, those who have achieved the stages of realization from stream entry up. But in many other passages and text, the word sappurisa is used in a very broad and general way, not to indicate specifically an Aryan person, but just the kind of ideal, normal individual that's approved of in the early Buddhist teachings, the kind of model that we should follow in our day-to-day life, the kind of person we should aspire to become. And this would be a person who is diligent in abandoning faults and shortcomings, and who is also diligent in cultivating and acquiring virtues, wholesome qualities. So this passage shows some of the marks of the sappurisa in regard to speech. So this good person does not disclose the faults of others, even when asked about them. And so one is reluctant to give rise to this fault-finding mind. And so if you're asked about them, of course, sometimes you have to, under the circumstances, you have to speak about the faults of others, but one does so reluctantly and out of necessity. And so if you're asked about them, then you speak about the faults of others, but mentioning only what's necessary under the circumstances. One doesn't go on harping on the faults of others, expanding upon them, speaking about them in detail. But when you notice other people have good qualities, virtuous qualities, then you're very happy to speak about the virtues and good qualities of others. You praise the good qualities of others. You hold up other people as being models worthy of following, worthy of emulating. So even when not asked, you say, oh, he's such a good and generous person, so kind, so humble, so scrupulous in his behavior, so generous in helping promote worthy causes. He has so much kindness and compassion, and he is so studious, so wise, so intelligent. And so you're ready to praise others whenever there's an opportunity for praising them. And if you're questioned about them, then you speak about the good qualities of others without gaps and omissions. And then the good person is willing to disclose his own faults, even when not asked about them. But I have to add a qualification to this. It doesn't mean that you should start, whenever you encounter new people or even your old friends, you should start speaking about all of your shortcomings, all of your faults, and just go on speaking for half an hour, full hour, just speaking about one fault, one shortcoming, one deficiency after another. Because then you get rather, maybe it's a sign of a self-centered mind to just go on dwelling over and over on speaking about your own faults. But it's just that when there are the appropriate circumstances, when you've committed some fault and people are asking, if you're working with others on a project and something goes wrong and you are the one who's maybe you made the mistake that caused the project to fail, then you should be willing to be open and come out and say, it's all my fault, or primarily my fault. I failed to do this, or I made this mistake, and therefore the project failed because of my wrong decision. And so when there's an occasion to speak about your faults, then you speak about them. But you don't become obsessed with your faults and shortcomings and just go on proclaiming them with, like you're announcing them from the rooftop when others have other things to do and other things to think about. Because in a way, that's also a sign of egocentric way of thinking, always speaking about your faults and shortcomings. But when there's an occasion to speak about them, then you admit them openly. And if you're asked about them, then you're willing to speak about them at some length, fully and in detail, but I would say only in accordance with the situation, not making a whole grocery list of all your faults and shortcomings. And when anybody asks you about your mistakes, you take out the grocery list and start speaking, over and over and detailing in the most minute detail, all of your faults and shortcomings. So it's not like you have to be hitting yourself with a whip in order to be considered a good person. Okay, then the next is very important, that the good person is very hesitant about disclosing his or her own virtues. So even when other people ask, maybe when something excellent has been done, and people will say, well, who is the one who is responsible for this remarkable success of our project? It's only with a great deal of hesitancy that you'll come forward and say, I was the one who did this. And so the good person is one who does good deeds, but you could say that they erase the traces of their good deeds after they've done them. And so this is a kind of person who might make a very generous donation to a worthy cause, but doesn't want their name to be listed. So they'll say, please list me as anonymous. And so they try to conceal their virtues. So even when asked about them, they don't disclose them. But if you're pressed and asked about some good deed that you've done or some virtue you might possess, then you'll speak about them reluctantly, with gaps in omissions, not fully and in detail. So these are the 4 qualities that can be understood as the marks of a good person. Now, having said this, I have to also add some notes from other suttas which shed some further light on this passage. First, there is a sutta also in the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of the Fours, Sutta number 3, in which the Buddha is speaking about, again, about the qualities of a good person, by which the good person is blameless beyond reproach and generates much merit. And the first two of these is that in a particular situation, he'll investigate that situation. And when he finds that somebody has done something wrong, he'll speak dispraise of one who deserves dispraise. So you see, that seems to be a contradiction, that in this sutta it said the good person does not disclose the faults of others even when asked about them. But here it said that under certain situation, the good person will speak dispraise of one who deserves dispraise. So he'll speak about the faults of others when another person is at fault. And again, having investigated and scrutinized, he'll speak praise of one who deserves praise. Okay, so that agrees with what is said in this sutta. So you have to know the situation, when it's appropriate to speak criticism and when it's appropriate not to criticize others. Then there's, this is another sutta in the Book of Fours, sutta number 100. Let's jump down. Okay, here the Buddha is in conversation with a certain wanderer, and he says that there are 4 kinds of persons found in the world. Okay, first there's a person who speaks dispraise of someone who deserves dispraise, and the dispraise is accurate and truthful, and he does not speak praise of someone who deserves praise, so the praise would be accurate, truthful, and timely. Okay, there's another person who speaks praise of someone who deserves this praise. Let me just get this. Okay, he speaks this praise of someone who deserves this praise, and the dispraise is truthful. But he does not speak praise of someone who deserves praise, though this praise would be truthful. Okay, then there's another person who speaks praise of someone who deserves praise, and the praise is truthful, but he does not speak dispraise of someone who deserves dispraise, though the dispraise would be truthful. Oops. So that's number 2. Then there's a person who does not speak dispraise of someone who deserves dispraise, though the dispraise would be truthful, and he does not speak praise of someone who deserves praise, though the praise would be truthful. And then the 4th is another person who speaks dispraise of someone who deserves dispraise, and the dispraise is truthful, and he speaks praise of someone who deserves praise, and the praise is truthful. So those are the 4 kinds of persons. So which one, he's asking the wanderer, do you think is the most excellent and sublime? And the wanderer, of these 4, he chooses the 3rd, that the one who seems to him to be the most excellent is the one who does not speak dispraise of someone who deserves this praise, though the praise is truthful, and does not speak praise of someone who deserves praise, even though the praise would be truthful. And the reason he gives is because he thinks the best attitude to adopt is one of equanimity. And so this is an attitude that I have to say that many people who are Buddhist adopt. They think the ideal attitude is not to praise anyone who deserves praise and not to criticize anybody who deserves criticism, because they want to remain detached, to maintain their peace and equanimity. And so they stand back, not criticizing, not praising. And also this kind of attitude, I would say, affects our relationship to participation in the political arena. So many Buddhists think the ideal political attitude is not to look into the different good qualities and faults of the candidates, not to try to evaluate their positions, but just to step back completely and maintain a kind of attitude of detached neutrality, not favoring one candidate over another. Because if you choose one candidate over another or try to evaluate their positions, your mind becomes embroiled in judgments and evaluations. And I think the ideal attitude for the Buddhist is to remain non-judgmental, looking at everybody without making judgments, evaluations, determinations of their good qualities and faults. But the Buddha doesn't agree with that. The Buddha says that of those four, the one that is the most excellent is the one who speaks this praise of someone who deserves this praise, and that this praise is truthful, and one who speaks praise of someone who deserves praise, and the praise is truthful. And then he says, for what reason? Because what excels is knowledge of the proper time to speak in any particular case. And then the commentary has a note on this, that it's the nature of the wise, when they have known it is the proper time to speak this praise of one who deserves this praise, and to speak praise of one who deserves praise. And so if you look at this superficially, it looks like there's a contradiction between the two suttas. This sutta says that the good person doesn't disclose the faults of others, doesn't, in this case we would say, doesn't dispraise those who deserves dispraise, whereas this sutta says that the good person speaks this praise of someone who deserves this praise. And so how do we reconcile these two suttas? Is there a real contradiction between them? Any thoughts?
No, Bhante.
You have to raise the hand and use the hand symbol in the participant box. Okay, Brenda?
Yes, Bhante, my thought would be that the quality of the mind behind the praise and dispraise, if it's motivated by ill will or conceit, that would have some impact on whether that was an appropriate approach. And the Buddha is praising someone who is showing the nature of someone, but he's not doing it with the mind of ill will or conceit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't know if anybody, that would be the same answer that I would give. So I don't know if anybody has anything to add to that, but we'll see. So Olivia, okay.
Good morning, Bhante. It's I have the same notion, just in different words, in the sense that, because that's where I have the most difficulty. It is to do and say what has to be said in a timely manner that's accurate, but with
Yeah.
a mind of goodwill and kindness and protection for everyone. You're not doing it for yourself.
Yeah.
You're doing it for the good of the larger group.
Yeah, exactly. Also very well expressed. Okay, Yoland?
Bhante, there's a sentence here that says, because what excels Potalya is knowledge of the proper time to speak in any particular case. I like that one, and I think the whole thing that you said about in Buddhism to remain non-judgmental,
Yeah.
that seems to me as the most humble and honest and forthright way to put it, because we don't need to praise others because their deeds show, and we don't need to be praised because our deeds show, and our behavior shows itself of the things that we do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, but the Buddha does say in the Sutta to Potalya, this is the number 100, he
Yes.
says that in his view, the most excellent is the one who praises those who deserve praise when the praise is truthful and accurate. And I think this is actually, I mean, of course, I agree with the Buddha here that it's valuable to ourselves when somebody does some special, a good deed or exhibits a good quality, to praise that person. It's not that the person really needs the praise themselves, but in the sense it adorns us. It's an adornment of our own heart that we can come forward when other people show good qualities and praise them, because it makes other people aware of that good qualities of the person we're praising. And also it shows a kind of magnanimity of spirit on our own part, that we are able to recognize and extol those who are truly worthy of praise. Whereas if one withholds the praise when the person deserves praise, then it's a little bit of a kind of miserliness. One doesn't want to publicly and openly acknowledge their good deeds.
But I'm not talking about it from the miserly point of view. I'm talking about it from the point of view of just because, okay, I understand what you're saying, but I'm wondering if there's a way to do it without the desire to be praised. Because if we're doing the things that we should be doing the right way,
Yeah.
and so is everyone else, do we need to be praised?
Well, it's not that.
Guide ourselves.
No, it's not. He's not speaking about the case where you are seeking praise for yourself, but the Buddha here is speaking about praising someone else who deserves praise. To give just an example from the sutta, the Buddha often praises Sariputta. So when Sariputta gives a discourse, the Buddha doesn't just sit back and remain silent, but he'll say, "Excellent, excellent, Sariputta. I agree with you, and if I was asked those questions, I would have answered in the same way." Yeah, so it's good to be in the habit of praising those who do good things, who show good, display good qualities, and it holds them up as a model for others.
So do we have an attachment to that praise?
Well, it's that you're praising the other person. It's not that you're being attached. It's not that other people are praising you and then you become attached to getting praise from others.
But the praiser also has an attachment to giving the praise, doesn't he or she?
Maybe.
Because we give praise,
Yeah.
and there's a feeling in ourselves
Yeah.
of happiness to give that praise.
Yeah, I think that's a good practice to praise others who deserve praise, even though it makes you feel happy. And if there's a little attachment to that, I don't think that's a bad kind of attachment,
Okay.
because you are, in a sense, you're opening your heart to others and admiring others and making other people aware of the good qualities of others. And in a way that's, it's a method to break down the rather narrow way of thinking of only wanting others to praise ourselves, but
Thank
not being ready to acknowledge the good qualities of others.
Thank you,
Okay.
Monte.
Yeah.
I understand now. Thank you,
Okay.
Monte.
Let's see, Kathy, you could, okay.
I think it's very important that you know for sure if the dispraise or praise are accurate, truthful, and of course have it done timely, and, and how wise you are that you're
Yeah.
able to really truly to know it's accurate and truthful.
Yeah,
I
of
think
course.
that's the difference between these two.
Yeah.
If you're not truly for sure, then you're reluctant.
Yeah, of course. That is emphasized by those words that are added in the passage. Okay, Marcel.
Thank you, Bante. So the earlier Brenda brings up about the intention, but even without the intention, I would say just from the text itself, there is no contradiction, because there is one keyword here that says timely.
Yeah.
So the dispraise is accurate, truthful, and timely.
Yeah.
And it accords with the earlier sutta when it says we only disclose the virtues when asked. So I think this keyword timely accords with the
Yeah.
line that says when asked. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's any contradiction here.
Yeah. Okay, I see other people have their hands raised, but I do want to move on. And I want to take another sutta that helps to shed some light on, or that helps us to reconcile the apparent contradiction in these two suttas. And this is a sutta where Sariputta is speaking. And he's speaking about how a monk should behave when he wants to reprove, that is, to criticize another monk. Before doing so, it said that he should establish 5 things in himself, 5 kinds of reflection he should undertake before he speaks critically to another monk. And elsewhere, the same statement is ascribed to the Buddha, but I took it from the Anguttara Nikaya Book of Fives. So he says, first, he should consider that I will speak at a proper time, not at an improper time. So if you want to criticize others, particularly to criticize them directly to their face, you have to choose the right time. So if another person, you want to criticize them and they are sitting together with their friends, then you don't come over to them and start criticizing them when they're in the midst of the friends, because that's going to hurt them and humiliate them and maybe make them angry, and they might even become your enemy because of that. But you would choose, and then also you wouldn't, if they're engaged in some work that demands their full attention, you're not going to come over and start criticizing them when they're engaged in that work. Or if you see that they're sitting in, if the monk is sitting in meditation, you don't come over and tap him on the shoulder and say, I want to speak to you. But you wait until that person is at leisure and alone, and you have enough time to undertake a discussion. Then you say, I would like to speak to you about something. And then you sit down. Then you can have the discussion. So you choose the proper time. And then the matter has to be truthful. So you have to assess if you're going to criticize that other person for the behavior. You have to be sure that it is, that the matter that you want to speak to them about is truthful. And what's interesting, when we look particularly in the Vinaya Pitaka, the book of discipline, what often happens is that a monk will be engaging in some kind of wrong behavior, and then a report about that misbehavior will come to the other monks, and then the other monks will go to the Buddha and say that people are complaining about the behavior and such a monk. Then the Buddha will call that misbehaving monk to his presence, and the Buddha doesn't begin at once by criticizing the misbehaving monk, but he says, it is reported that you have been doing such and such. Is that true or not true? And of course, the Buddha knows already, he knows in advance that the monk has actually been misbehaving, but he wants to ensure publicly that the monk makes a frank admission of his misbehavior before the Buddha criticizes him and corrects him. So he'll get the monk to confess openly to his misbehavior, to affirm that the report about him is true. Then the Buddha will criticize him and then lays down a formal rule of training. Okay, so sometimes it's not always possible to be 100% true, but we should make the effort before criticizing others, at least trying to be sure that we have a reason, that we are reasonably confident that maybe the bad reports about them are true. Okay, then before we speak, we have to take account of the feelings of the other person. So we have to speak gently, not harshly. And this is a matter sometimes of assessing one's state of mind and the particular circumstances under which we speak. Of course, let me just give some observations from the conduct of my own teacher, my own ordination teacher in Sri Lanka. This was the Venerable Balangoda Ananda Maitreya, with whom I stayed back in the early 1970s when I was a young monk. And he had many of his disciples in the monastery where I was ordained were novices, very young monks, 12 years old, 13, 14 years old. And in order to discipline them, they would, just young boys who were just ordained, as kids. So to discipline them properly, he would have to speak to them sometimes, standing on the outside. We would judge his speech to be harsh or rough. He would say, Nanda, you didn't do this. Nagita, you better do this. And so I would hear him when I would go to study with him. I would hear him speak to the novices in that way. And it would seem, just judging from the way he speaks, that he's speaking harshly. But then when the novice goes out and I'm just alone with him, then he would chuckle and say, to get things done, you have to speak to them in that way. So even though his speech seems to be harsh, but he's really doing it with a gentle mind in order to train these young novices. And there's another sutta, I think it's also in the Book of Fours, we'll be coming to a little bit later, where the Buddha compares himself to a horse trainer. He says that the horse trainer, when he's training a horse, sometimes trains the horse gently by patting the horse on the head, speaking to it sweetly, and then giving the horse a task to perform. Sometimes the horse trainer, to get the horse to behave properly, has to speak roughly and even use a goad or a whip. And sometimes the horse trainer will use both methods, sometimes speaking softly and gently, sometimes speaking harshly and using the whip. And the Buddha says, in the same way, when I'm training disciples, I sometimes have to speak to them in a strict and stern way to get them to train properly. And then the horse trainer says that sometimes when I have a horse that can't be trained at all, I have to kill the horse. And the Buddha says also sometimes when I'm training a disciple, I have to kill the disciple. But then he adds, what do I mean by killing the disciple? If none of the other methods work, then I give him the silent treatment. I don't speak to him gently or harshly, but I just let him do what he wants. And in that way, I give him the silent treatment, and I tell all of the other monks, give him the silent treatment. And then when nobody is speaking to him, then he recognizes his faults and changes his way. Okay, so, but generally, so those are some exceptions depending on the circumstances, but in one's own mind, one has to be sure that one has a soft mind. And the general rule is to speak gently, politely, and softly, because that is generally the most effective way to get the person to change their behavior. And when one speaks to the other person, one has to do so in a beneficial way. That is, the intention is to be of benefit to the other person, to help the other person recognize their faults, give up their faults, and adopt good ways of behavior. And generally, the best way to help the person change their behavior and adopt beneficial ways is to speak gently. Because too often, if one speaks harshly, sharply to the other person, they become more firmly fixed in their bad ways. And then they develop hatred and antagonism to yourself. And they might even try to mobilize other people to turn against you. And then you make many enemies. But if you speak gently and point out how that person can abandon their faults and develop good behavior, then that person will appreciate it and will admire you and even love you very much. And then perhaps the most fundamental requirement, even though it's mentioned last, is to speak with a mind of loving kindness. That is, before one speaks, when one sees the other person misbehaving, or you want to correct the faults of the other person, you develop a mind of loving kindness, wishing that the other person will be well and happy, and wishing that they will abandon their faults and behave properly. And so when you first set up loving kindness, then you'll be disposed to choose the proper time to speak to that person. With loving kindness, you want to find out the truth. If it's something that you've heard from others, not something you've seen yourself, you want to make sure that you're speaking about a truthful matter. With loving kindness, you speak gently, and with loving kindness, you'll be motivated to help the person emerge from their faults and behave in beneficial ways. Okay, so I think that will take care of our treatment of this sutta. So does anybody have any questions or comments?
Yes, I just wanted to comment on the fact that this has such, practical application.
Yeah, who is speaking now?
This is Ulysses. Yes.
Oh, okay, okay.
This has such practical application. Like on, I mean, this is something that can be used. You know, even though we lay people are not living in a shanga, we can definitely apply this day to day in our jobs and in the office, and because it's a reality. It speaks to what we're doing now.
Yeah, yeah. And you shouldn't think that this is of a practical value only to lay people, and that monks are always naturally and invariably following these guidelines. I have to tell you very, very frankly that amongst monks, there's also always this tendency for them to be speaking critically about other monks. They speak to their friends critically. This one is at fault for this. That one is so sloppy in their behavior. This one is so greedy. This one is so boastful.
So that brings me to a question. So, and I mean, this is just out of curiosity mostly, like, of course, we're all human beings, but what is then lacking in the practice that produces this kind of, this kind of...
I think because our minds have a natural tendency to hide from us our faults and to focus upon the shortcomings of others. And yeah, so there's a kind of tendency towards self-deception about our faults. And maybe you could say it makes us feel good to dwell upon the faults of others, because then that sort of satisfies that tendency or this disposition of conceit to put ourselves above others. And then also, it's a tendency of the human mind to want to win the affection of others. And we think that one of the ways we win the affection of others is by dwelling on faults of still other people. Yeah, so I think those are some of the factors involved. Okay, Dean Anthony.
Good morning, Bhante.
Good morning.
When the Buddha passed away, Ananda was still alive. And it seems in the first council that there was a lot of criticism against him. Could you speak to, how that first council actually, behaved?
How that first council what?
Behaved.
How the monks
towards Ananda.
That gets into a big issue, and it seems to me in my reading, this is a little bit of maybe heretical opinion, but there was a certain degree of, I would call this monastic politics at work there. I suspect that there were two factions in the early Sangha, one who favored Ananda as the rightful successor of the Buddha, because Ananda was so close to the Buddha and looked after the Buddha and had learned all of the Buddha's discourses. And then another faction that was supporting the Venerable Mahakassapa, because the Venerable Mahakassapa stood out through the strength of his character, his austerity, his diligence. And it seems that the faction that was supporting Mahakassapa got the upper hand at the first council and wanted to show that Ananda reached arhatship late after the Buddha's passing, and to highlight certain faults and shortcomings in Ananda in order to strengthen the claim of Mahakassapa to be the rightful successor of the Buddha. So that's the way I would read that particular passage.
Yeah, I understand. I just think that, there are politics in any organization, and I understand that. But I think that if we look at your wonderful translations, we can see that maybe not everybody gets to be exemplary, all
Oh,
the
yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah,
So I think that way about the first council.
yeah, yeah. Okay, Henry?
Hello, Pandey.
Yeah, good morning.
Yes, I'd like to add to this first one about the 5 reflections before criticizing.
Yeah.
About the timing. I think it's very important that we need to find the appropriate time, and also how soon should you do the, I guess if I use the word criticizing, you don't want to wait for a day or 2 days or 5 days. You know, when the appropriate moment comes along, and in private, once you speak to that particular person about some of the shortcomings. So timing to me, I think is very important. And I'd like to share this with you and the others too. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah, of course, that is the case. I mean, if
Yes.
somebody committed some fault, I think in the legal profession, there's something called the statute of limitations,
Yeah.
where if somebody is guilty of a crime and then a certain period of time elapses before they are arrested and brought to trial, or arrested for that crime, they can't be tried because the statute of limitations has passed.
Well, not only that, too, but you want to make the appropriate time when when the occasion is right, and not to wait too long, you know,
Yeah,
when it becomes cold.
yeah,
you
that
know.
is certainly, that is true.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Kanti? Kanti?
Good morning, Bante. Can you hear me?
Okay, we go to,
Bante, can you hear me? Bante, can you hear
yeah,
me?
I'm just hearing something very faint. I don't hear a voice.
Oh, it's very faint. Can you hear me better now?
There's almost no volume.
Oh, so you can't hear.
Okay, I'll just have to pass over for now. Okay, Savan Kumar?
Hello, Bante.
Yeah.
I have the opinion that the Sariputta's framework is quite useful. Like first, it need to be beneficial and timely.
Yeah.
And it makes sense to confess the dispraise in timely manner, because if some authority asks question regarding some incident, then it's worth to explain the incident correctly.
Say again, I didn't quite catch it.
Like if some authority
Yeah.
asks some question regarding a person,
Yeah.
then it is worth to be truthful and to the point.
Yeah.
And if it is not timely, and if there is no point of, if it is not timely, it will actually harm our mind, and it will create imbalance within ourselves.
Yeah, of course, that's true, yeah. Okay, yeah,
Thank
let's
you.
see, John S.
Good morning, Bante.
Good morning.
During the discussion, I was thinking about when choosing how and when to speak, the importance of not speaking from a defiled mind.
Yeah.
And also, I heard so many things that I agreed with, but speaking from a place of generosity and also friendship. You know, friendship is very important. But something that really sparked my curiosity, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on it, is that you said that sometimes Buddhists make the mistake of emphasizing equanimity above all. And
That's the way they interpret equanimity, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but when I think of equanimity, I think of the Brahma Viharas, and I'm just wondering if, you know, are they choosing equanimity, you know, at the expense of the other Brahma Viharas, and not cultivating compassion and kindness and joy. I don't know if that's a right reading of it, but that's what came up for me, overemphasizing equanimity, or you know, their interpretation.
Well, I would say that is not so much what they're adopting as taking to be equanimity is not so much the equanimity as a Brahmavihara, but more, let's say, non-involvement or non-engagement as an approach to the conflictual situations that we encounter in everyday life. And so they think that the most appropriate way to behave is just to stand back and not become involved, not become engaged, where there's a contest of ideas, opinions, views, particularly I'm thinking in the political arena, where there can be true differences of opinion, differences of policy proposals, some of which will be truly beneficial to the general population. Other proposals and policies can be harmful. You know, so if one just stands back thinking, I'm not going to get involved, I'm going to remain detached, say when forces in the government are attacking particular groups of people that are considered undesirable or less worthy, then one is not, well, you could say that it's a failure in compassionate action on their part.
Yeah, that makes me think of, I don't know if I'm misusing the concept of the near enemy, but I sometimes think of indifference being the near enemy of healthy detachment.
Yeah, actually, yeah. I think one could say that that is maybe an example of the indifference as the near enemy of true equanimity. Okay.
Thank you, Bhante.
So we take Vincent, speaking from Great Britain. You can unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Bhante. But I'm just curious to find out the name of the sutta. Why is it called the bride? Vaduka was the Pali when I checked.
Why is it called?
The bride.
Oh, the bride.
Yeah.
Actually, that's an interesting question. Let me just. Oh, I see. Oh, I see. That there was a simile. Yeah, I didn't take the rest of the sutta. In fact, the simile here doesn't seem to go to match the content of the sutta very well. You can see the simile. We'll just take a quick look at the simile. It doesn't seem to match the body of the sutta. Okay, so here's the case of a bride is first brought into the home. And this is the Indian way of marriage, in which the woman will go, who's married, she will go to live with the family, the extended family of the husband. So at first, when she's brought to the home, she has this strong sense of hiri and ottappa, so she doesn't speak up in the presence of her in-laws. But after some time, when she becomes familiar with them, then she starts speaking rudely and harshly to her husband and her mother-in-law, father-in-law. Go away, what do you know? Okay, so then we have a case of a monk who's just newly gone forth into the homeless life. And so he's at first very humble, very quiet, and doesn't speak up very much in the presence of the others. But after he gets familiar, becomes familiar with the other residents of the monastery, then he starts speaking harshly, even to his teacher and preceptor, saying, get out of here, what do you know? And so then the text continues, you should train yourselves thus, we will dwell with the mind like that of a newly arrived bride. That is, one should be humble and not speak harshly and critically to others. But it seems to me that because the suttas have come down in an oral tradition, it seems here that the simile doesn't match the content of the sutta very well. It seems almost like it originally belonged to another sutta and that it got detached from that sutta and by mistake got attached here. But this explains why the sutta comes to be called the bride.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, let me get the participant list. So Vincent, the next is Tejas.
Hello, Bhante. I wonder whether I will digress if I'll ask this question. But since we are talking about how the speech is supposed to be, I was wondering how was the Buddha when it came to the mannerism of speaking? That is my question.
How was the Buddha when it came to the mannerism of speech?
Yes, Bhante.
Actually, in relation to that question, there's an interesting sutta, which it's in the Majjhima Nikaya. I believe it could be sutta number 59. Let me see if I could just get it quickly off the shelf.
Yes.
Yeah, my mind is getting rusty. It's sutta number 58. Okay. So here the Buddha is in conversation with a prince named Abhaya Raja Kumara. So he says that the speech that the Buddha knows to be false, incorrect, and unbeneficial, and which is disagreeable to others, he doesn't utter that kind of speech. If he knows a speech is true, but is unbeneficial to others, then he doesn't utter that kind of speech. If the speech is correct and beneficial to others, but it's disagreeable to others, then he will utter that kind of speech at the right time, under the right conditions. Okay, if the speech is false and unbeneficial, even if it's agreeable to others, he doesn't utter that kind of speech. If the speech is correct, true and correct, but unbeneficial and welcome to others, again, he doesn't utter that kind of speech. And if the speech is correct, beneficial, and welcome to others, then at the right time and under the right conditions, he'll utter that kind of speech. Yeah, so that gives us a good perspective. So you can see that the Buddha will speak words that are disagreeable to others when he knows that they are true and beneficial. So that is like in the example, the analogy of the horse trainer. That is like the horse trainer will use the whip to whip the horse in order to get the horse to behave properly. Okay, Georgia?
Yes. I'm wondering if the sutras provide any additional or specific guidance about how a student should speak to or about their teacher, their spiritual teacher.
There might be, but I would have to do some research on that specific point. So there are passages like this now that come to mind in the Vinaya Pitaka, which says that, I'm not sure if this directly answers your question, but if the student sees that the teacher is misbehaving, the student should correct the teacher. And if the student sees that the teacher has adopted a wrong view, the student should again correct the teacher. Let me see if I could find that passage again right off the shelf. Yeah, it says that if the teacher has adopted a wrong view, then the student should dissuade him from that wrong view, or should get another monk to dissuade him from the wrong view, or should give him a talk on the Dhamma. If the preceptor has committed an offense against an important rule, then the student should get the order to impose the appropriate penalty on the teacher. It goes into a rather detail of the different classes of offense, but generally maybe as a general guideline that should do.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll take two more. If you're interested in this, it's in I.B. Horne's translation of the Vinaya Pitaka called Book of Discipline, and it is volume part 4, and it's roughly pages 65, 66.
Thank you.
Okay, Savita. Savita.
I'm from India.
Yeah.
I do some donation. However, there was no provision on the provision. I was looking for it.
Excuse me?
Bhante, am I audible?
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, I'm from India.
Yeah.
Hello. Yeah, I was willing to do some donation on the site, on BAUS site. However, there was no provision to do any donation from India. So I thought of asking you.
Yeah, that I don't know myself. You would have to write to or contact, the BAU's office, the office of the monastery.
Hi, Subida.
I'll do that. Yes, ma'am.
It's Johnny Wong. I'm a volunteer of BAUS. If you go to BAU's website, there's a contact us page. I will need your email address. I'm looking for someone from India to help me figure out the international donation. Please do that and give me, and from there we'll take it from there. Thanks.
I'll do that. Thank you.
I'm sorry for this.
Yeah. Okay, I think we're going to have to end for the day now because I'll have to go up for the meal now. So I just want to end with some further information about the programs that we offer over the internet. So on Saturdays, we have the Sutta study class. We start at 9:30 with a meditation from 9:30 till about 10 after 10. And then the Sutta discussion from 10:10 till 11:30. Then on Sunday evening, Venerable Mangala offers the group meditation from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. and that with a question and answer session from 8 to 8:30 p.m. That's on Sunday evening. And then on Wednesday evening, I offer a group meditation, again from 7 to 8 p.m. Then for further sutta study, some of my students, Stephen Sass and Regina Valdez, they have a sutta study group which meets on Sunday evening and Thursday evening from 7 to 7:45 p.m. It's called Sutta and the City. You can find the information about it through, if you search on Google for Sutta and the City, it should give you the necessary information. Okay, so that should do it. That should do it for today. And now let us end with the sharing of the merits. Let me get.
Thank you.
Wait, we have to do the sharing of the merits. Let me get the file.
Oh.
Okay, so now we're going to share the merits with the devas, the deities, the nagas, the dragon spirits, the bhutas or the fair spirits, asking them to protect the Buddha's teaching and to protect the world. So we'll recite in Pali. Akasata cha bhumata Devanaga Mahidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Sasanang Akasata cha bhumata Devanaga Mahidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Desanang Akasata cha bhumata Devanaga Mahidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Mang Parang Etavata Cha Hehi Sampadang Punya Sampadang Sabbe Deva Anumodantu Sabba Sampati Siddhya Etavata Cha Hehi Sampadang Punya Sampadang Sabbe Bhuta Anumodantu Sabba Sampati Siddhya Etavata Cha Hehi Sampadang Punya Sampadang Sabbe Sata Anumodantu Sabba Sampati Siddhya Pavagupadaya Avici Hetato Etantare Satakayu Papanna Rupya Rupicha Sanya Sanyino Dukha Pamuchantu Pusantu Nibuting.
Sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu.
Thank you, Bante.
Okay, so thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bante.
Saranai, Swami.
Saranai.
Okay,
Thank you, Bante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm so happy.
Okay, thank you for joining.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone. Amicable.